the shooting in D.C., manslaughter for Flint's water, and the goopy gospel of Gwyneth Paltrow. A fire that tore through a 24-story apartment building in the middle of the night in London killed at least 12 people. That number is expected to rise, as many are missing and more than 70 are in the hospital. Investigators are still determining the cause, but the tower is a public housing complex, and residents say they'd made formal complaints about its safety.
90% of residents signed an independent petition asking for there to be an investigation into the organisation that runs this building because they were so incompetent, and the council turned it down.
The building's management said they would cooperate with authorities on the investigation. At least 9 people have been killed by gunmen in Mogadishu. The attackers took hostages in a popular restaurant after setting off a car bomb followed by heavy gunfire. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. The Senate has overwhelmingly approved new sanctions to punish Russia for its meddling in the 2016 election. The amendment, part of a bill strengthening sanctions on Iran, also creates a requirement for Congress to review any attempt by President Trump to relax, suspend, or terminate the sanctions. U.S. Marshals have arrested 2 men involved in the beating of Kurdish protesters outside the Turkish ambassador's residence in Washington. The demonstrators were protesting Turkish President Recep Erdogan's visit when men who appeared to be Erdogan's bodyguards unleashed a violent attack. The 2 men arrested today have been charged with felonies, among them aggravated assault and assault with significant bodily injury. And American officials reportedly plan to charge 12 members of President Erdogan's security detail.
Hey, is that guy okay out there? That guy been shot, is he okay? Is anybody talking to him?
Well, that was one hell of a way to start the fucking morning.
This was a quiet street at 7 o'clock this morning. A couple blocks that way, members of the Congressional Republican baseball team were practicing for their annual charity game against the Democrats tomorrow night at Nat Stadium. Then gunshots rang out. Steve Scalise, a member of the House leadership, was hit. So was a staffer for Roger Williams, a member from Texas. So was a lobbyist. So was a Capitol Hill police officer.
The heroes are the police officers who attacked the shooter, and in doing so, quite probably saved many, many lives.
Before opening fire, the shooter asked one of the congressmen which party the team represented.
Do you believe that your teammates were targeted because they are Republicans? You're Republican?
Based on the question he asked me, I would make that assumption, and he proceeded to shoot Republicans. You take that for what it's worth.
Can you describe?
The only reason there were Capitol Police there is because Scalise is a member of the leadership. Had Steve not been there today, there would have been zero security, and it would have been a killing field. I mean, you know, I'm pretty good hands at the hot corner, but that glove ain't gonna stop bullets from a rifle or a pistol. That's just the reality.
The shooter, James Hodgkinson, is dead. Shooting at politicians is a political act, so it didn't take long for speculation to begin about his motives. Hodgkinson was a 66-year-old home inspector from Illinois. He's a white guy, born in America. So he avoided the immediate shit show over terrorism and Trump's travel ban. But Hodgkinson's Facebook page is loaded with pro-Bernie Sanders anti-Trump messages. He apparently volunteered for Sanders' campaign. He's a member of various anti-GOP Facebook groups, including Terminate the Republican Party. And 2 days ago, he posted a pretty angry statement about Donald Trump. A few miles away on Capitol Hill, there were prayers.
We ask your blessing on our brother, Representative Steve Scalise, the 2 officers and the staffer who have been shot.
And a response from Senator Sanders.
Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms.
Speaker Paul Ryan and House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi both spoke.
An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Members of both parties emphasized unity, but the debate about guns wasn't far from anyone's mind, including the Republicans who were here under fire today, like Mo Brooks, who actually had to run from the gunman.
Congressman, does this change your views on the gun situation in America?
Not with respect to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment right to bear arms is to help ensure that we always have a republic.
Here in Virginia, there are no background checks or permit requirements for concealed carry or open carry of handguns or long guns. Democrats are now going to try to figure out when is the right time to turn this conversation from unity back to our gun laws.
There are too many guns on the street. Background checks, shutting down gun show loopholes. That's not for today's discussion, but it's not just about politicians. We worry about this every day for all of our citizens.
We've been through this balancing act before. In 2011, Representative Gabby Giffords was shot in the head at a constituent event in Tucson, Arizona. The calls for unity were intense then, too.
We must do something.
There was also an intense and divisive debate over gun policy. But everyone in Congress knows that neither unity nor productive discussion on guns is coming anytime soon. Senator Lindsey Graham had probably the most realistic response to today. It's just a crazy world, he said. Let's be grateful it wasn't worse. We just got to move on.
Today, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette announced major new charges related to the water crisis in Flint.
Let me say that involuntary manslaughter is a very serious crime.
Schuette charged the state's Health and Human Services Director, Nick Lyon, with involuntary manslaughter in the death of 85-year-old Robert Skidmore, who lived in a Flint suburb and died during a Legionnaire's outbreak connected to the city's lead water crisis.
After allegedly being informed of the growing Legionella situation in Flint, Nick Lyon failed to inform the public of this health threat.
In fact, Lyon allegedly knew about the outbreak for a year before telling anyone. 4 other state officials who've already pled not guilty to lesser allegations were also brought up on involuntary manslaughter charges, including the city's former emergency manager, Darnell Early, the man at the helm when Flint switched its water source. That brings the total number of current or former officials indicted to 17. Lyon and 4 others could go to prison for 15 years, and the indictments mark a turning point in the Flint investigation. It's the first time government officials have been directly linked to the deaths of Flint residents. But culpability only goes so far. Today, Schuette confirmed that he won't be charging Michigan Governor Rick Snyder.
The fact that he's letting Governor Snyder off the hook for manslaughter is appalling. That man, the governor, since we have been under state control since 2011, has been the single decision maker for the city of Flint. Every decision landed on his desk, and so he knew.
Snyder and Schuette are both Republicans, but they've frequently been on opposite sides of the Flint crisis. There's speculation that Schuette is eyeing the governor's mansion next year when Snyder term limits out. And the 2 men traded some not-so-subtle political digs today when Snyder hit back at Schuette, saying he had full faith and confidence in the HHS director and called on the AG to hurry up and give court dates to people who've already been charged with crimes against Flint.
Everything that's happened to us in Flint has been political. People have died. All of these deaths could have been prevented if these people who are in charge of our public safety and our health did their job.
The Federal Reserve Bank raised interest rates again today by a 0.25 percentage point. It's the 3rd rate hike in a row from the central bank after years of nearly 0% interest rates locked in after the 2008 financial crisis. The Fed is being careful, maybe too careful. Roberto Ferdman has more.
Today's interest rate hike surprised no one. The Fed has been saying it wants to get rates higher for a while now. But that doesn't make it a good idea. The Fed traditionally raises interest rates when it thinks the economy is growing too fast and inflation could rise. But neither of those 2 things is happening right now. The The economy only grew by 1.2% in the first quarter of this year, and despite the Trump administration's promises, most experts don't expect it to grow much faster than 2% anytime soon. Inflation is also low. It's basically been 2% or less for the last 2.5 years. It's possible the Fed is raising rates because it thinks there just isn't much more room for the economy to grow. The official unemployment rate is all the way down to 4.3%, but that number is deceptive. The labor force participation rate among working-age adults is still almost 2 percentage points lower than it was before the crisis. In other words, there's still millions of people who dropped out of the workforce and still haven't gotten back in. So if the economy isn't growing quickly and inflation is under control and there's still a bunch of people out of work, why is the Fed raising rates? The answer has a lot to do with the biases of most central bankers. They don't like any risk of inflation, and they don't like things that are out of the ordinary, like the very low interest rates we've had for a very long time. So with the economy stable, they feel like it's time to get things back to normal.
The process of raising interest rates and getting monetary policy back to normal is really about the fact that the economy is getting back to normal, and therefore it doesn't need as much of a help from really low interest rates and monetary stimulus.
The problem is that for lots of Americans, things are still a long way from normal, and raising rates isn't going to help them. Today's move will make mortgages more expensive. It'll also make it more expensive for companies to borrow money, which stops them from hiring as many people as they would otherwise. This is a risk-averse move by the Fed, but for plenty of American workers, it's a risky one.
Today, Russia's parliament approved a plan to raze close to 5,000 occupied apartment blocks in central Moscow and relocate 1.6 million people in one of the largest urban resettlement plans in history. But not before last-ditch protests against the measure turned ugly, with several protesters detained. The government says the Soviet-era blocks, all in prized central districts, are decrepit, and residents need to move to newly built housing. But with no guarantees on where that new housing will be, the communities being displaced are fuming. Protests against the demolition swelled ahead of today's vote. At the largest demonstration, 60,000 people massed in central Moscow.
Закон, который фактически разрушает государство и фундамент нашей страны. Это базовое конституционное право, право собственности.
31-year-old Olga Shuk is leading protests for her block.
Мы находимся на площади Академика Сахарова. Здесь проходит митинг против закона о реновации.
She bought her apartment in a prime spot in central Moscow 5 years ago. The government will guarantee she and her neighbors a new apartment of the same size, but it's unlikely to be in the same area, and there won't be any compensation. The demolition and replacement of almost 270 million square feet of housing could take 20 years. It'll cost $61 billion.
Они хотят, чтобы мы переехали в более дальний район, да, а на месте нашей Золотой Земли здесь возведут элитные жилые комплексы, бизнес-центры и торговые центры. У нас уже висят по району рекламы о новостройках элитных апартаментов, застройке элитных апартаментов, хотя мы еще стоим.
Opposition activists like Dmitry Gudkov have argued that there's much more to the unrest than residents' personal attachment to their homes.
Кто-то хочет заполучить земли в Москве, в самых престижных районах Москвы. Потому что если ты сносишь дом пятиэтажный, а строишь там 25-этажный, то можно 5 этажей расселить, а 20 этажей продать. Заработать неплохие деньги. Поэтому, мне кажется, за всем этим проектом торчат уши лоббистов-строителей.
Officials say the blocks are simply too old. They were built by Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev in the 1950s, supposedly as a quick, temporary fix to a housing crisis. Peter Tolstoy, a lawmaker with Putin's United Russia Party, helped draft the demolition plan.
И с такими людьми, которые находятся в таких условиях жизни, говорить о модернизации страны, о великой стране вообще невозможно. А мы хотим, чтобы у них было достойное, нормальное, современное жилье. Вы знаете, я думаю, что реакция связана с недостатком информации у людей по поводу этого проекта. Я считаю, что власти хотят избежать появления в Москве гетто, которые, к сожалению, существуют и в ряде европейских городов, и в ряде американских городов, населенные людьми небогатыми, а так прямо скажем, бедными и мигрантами.
Despite the opposition, the bill is expected to be signed into law by President Putin. But that could breed resentment in Russia's capital.
Когда в дом постучала такая беда, как будущий закон о реновации, я почувствовала, что я не могу сидеть на месте, не могу. Я всегда была за нашу власть, неважно, какая партия была бы у власти, я всегда ее поддерживала. Сейчас власть вынудила меня немножко задуматься, а правильно ли я сделала свой выбор на выборах.
Once upon a time, Gwyneth Paltrow was just a widely beloved, award-winning actress. But she finally caught a break in 2008 when she launched her nutritional newsletter, Goop, which gave birth to a lifestyle empire. Today, she's the high priestess of a many-tentacled, monetized belief system that just sold out its first wellness summit. And Mary H.K. Choi got a ticket.
The Goop Wellness Summit is really for anybody who is looking to have insight, some autonomy around health.
So it's not just like 600 of your besties or anything like that?
I really don't know very many people in the audience, so it's been really, really nice and very profound for me to interact with some of these women.
The summit feels like you're living out the latest Goop newsletter. There are thoughtfully curated gluten-free vegan dishes, blowouts, wellness panels, and of course, Goop devotees.
So we're excited about the gut health talk because the gut is the second brain.
Has Goop changed your life?
Yeah, well, we both have some rare health conditions. So,
Right.
It's just really nice to have access to something like that.
Well, we're having collagen martinis later, as one does.
Elise Lonan is Goop's chief content officer.
I might have some bone broth later. The goal of the day is ambitious. It's to really help people transform or shift paradigm, for people to walk out of that room and feel like they've been shifted.
The hall is a veritable what's that of the multi-trillion-dollar wellness industry. Access isn't cheap. Tickets range from $500 to $1,500 if you want to have lunch with Paltrow. There are also workout classes, crystal therapy, sound healing, aura readings, and antioxidant IV drips with vitamin boosters.
So how much is everything I'm getting right now?
Probably be around 500.
Wow. Sleek, expensive, experimental, and for the most part, white. Paltrow's not unlike other lifestyle gurus, but her advice on putting jade eggs into your vagina inspires a special breed of cynicism.
Do you think anyone's hate attending this conference?
That's funny. I'm sure. Maybe. I'll be curious. I mean, it's a big investment of time and money, so it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are probably some skeptics here.
Sure, I was born.
There are, however, medical doctors on the roster, like Dr. Alejandro Younger, a kind of gut health rock star.
The gut is like the root of a plant. It's where we absorb our nutrients and we send them through the trunks to our leaves and flowers and fruits, which are our hair, skin, and organs.
I turn myself on.
And TED Talk types like Esther Perel, a therapist who specializes in sex, as a modern-day Dr. Ruth. So do you actually believe in some of the other treatments and protocols here, like, bee sting therapy or crystals and things like that?
What does it mean when we say believe? Do I have faith in it? Am I willing to? And faith, it means, do I have a leap that allows me to engage with the unknown? Yes, why not?
Take in a little bit more air.
It's not that we're opposed to conventional medicine. We just also are very interested in alternative medicine, having autonomy. I've always been that person who has sort of introduced the culture or the media to things that people think are weird. It's really important, I think, to ask the questions.
Is the ire and flack worth it to you?
Oh, yeah, of course.
That's Vice News Tonight for Wednesday, June 14th.